When will the US remove Syria sanctions? I worked in sanctions at the Treasury Department and I helped craft the Syria sanctions in particular, so let's get into it. After Syria's brutal dictator Bashar al-Assad ran like a coward to Moscow and Ahmed al-Shara took over in December, there have been increasing calls by countries and NGOs to remove the sanctions that have been imposed on Syria for over a decade. They argue that these sanctions should be removed to help the Syrian population. So after the new year, the Treasury Department issued what's called a general license to allow for transactions related to electricity, energy, water, and sanitation. Humanitarian aid like food and medicine has always been allowed. But that's not really removing sanctions. That's just about making it easier for aid to go in and for other efforts that would directly support the broader population. The fact is that removing these sanctions is complicated, and it's unlikely to happen until we really know where things are headed in Syria. Let me explain. We'll start with the fact that Syria's new leader and the group that took over Damascus, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, are sanctioned under terrorism sanctions because they were a terrorist group and they used to be tied to al-Qaeda. Removing those sanctions is risky without knowing for sure that Ahmed al-Shara is done with his old ways and is going to follow through on the promises he's made to hold elections and protect minorities. Then you have sanctions on the Syrian government and its institutions, things like its military agencies, its central bank, and the state oil company. Those sanctions were put in place to make it harder for Assad to finance his war machine. Now, those frozen funds belong to the Syrian state. But what if the US and Europe and others who have frozen billions of dollars in funds release them to the current government led by Ahmed al-Shara, who then doesn't follow through on his words, or worse, uses those funds to pursue repressive behavior? Then we'll have been complicit in supporting and financing that behavior. And finally, you have a bunch of sanctions tied to Bashar al-Assad himself and his family members, and those aren't going anywhere because Assad is still alive. Well, he is for now, but if I were him, I might not stand near any balconies or drink tea. I don't expect the US to lift Syria sanctions soon because they won't want to give up the leverage they have to hold Ahmed al-Shara accountable to the promises he's made, and they don't have reason to trust him yet. It's up to him to prove himself first.